Hello and welcome to the Open College podcast series. Welcome back to those who have listened before. My name's Oxana and I'll be your host for this episode where we aim to discuss all things childcare and of course the importance of choosing a good quality childcare facility for your child, if you're in the market for one. For this episode, we spoke with Siobhan Browne, our early years specialist, who will be lecturing on our upcoming childcare degree. Siobhan has a huge amount of knowledge and experience in the sector, and here's what she had to say when I started off by asking her what kind of research parents should do prior to picking a facility.
Okay, so first thing you want to do is get a list of the services that are available in your area, and the best way to get that is to contact the local county childcare committee.
Okay.
Because they will have a list of all services that are registered with TUSA.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that if you're choosing a service, that it is a service that is officially registered with TUSA.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And is there any kind of information that's available there? So you'll go off and you'll find this list and you say, I don't know, Silly Billies, whatever it could be called, in County Tipperary. I want to put my child there. It looks like a great place. It's handy for me to go there. How do you know that it's actually a good quality place? Is there any kind of reports out there that you could look for?
Absolutely. So inspection reports are available on the TUSA website. So all registered nurseries are inspected by TUSA, and all of the reports, once they're finalised, are published on TUSA's website. So you can search by area or by the name of the service, and you'll find their most recent report on the TUSA website.
And how often would they normally do these inspections and publish reports?
They are supposed to be on a yearly basis. Yep. They tend to take a little bit longer due to staff shortages in the inspectors. For example, there was a couple of years gap between my last inspections. But having said that, they do prioritise services that maybe had a not so good inspection the last time. Mm-hmm. So if a service has been very regularly inspected, that also may be a red flag.
Okay. And what's the kind of main things that someone should look out for on a report? Because I know it covers a lot. So what are the main things that a parent should look out for? Because I know, when someone's doing an inspection of a childcare centre, it's kind of unlikely that it's it's going to come out perfect, I guess.
Of course.
So
and there's always something small.
Exactly. So what could be like the big things?
Some things, of course, are going to be overlooked, and you're not as much concerned with the technical things. Like sometimes there might be a non-compliance in the report that there wasn't 2 references for every staff. They might have only had 1 on file, but these things can go missing over the years, especially if they're long-term staff. But the inspectors do quite in-depth sections on the quality in the service and the relationships between the children and the staff, and they're the important things to watch out for. They'll write about everything that's available to the children, the types of activities that are taking place, the equipment that's available to the children. So the reports can be quite in-depth, and they do focus a lot on what's actually going on for the children during the day. So they're worth a read.
Yeah, no, definitely. And would that inspection report be available in the creche if you're doing a viewing? So, you go in and... It
should be. Again, it doesn't have to be staged within the creche, but most creches would, particularly if you're proud of your inspection report, you'd have it on display. We have ours on display in our notice board all the time.
Ah, very good. That's just the kind of thing I wanted to know, because sometimes parents, if the parent can't find it, say some kind of IT issue or something, just so that they know that they can go in and they can ask, oh, can we see this, or go through it with you, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, you can absolutely request to see the report from the service itself as well.
Yeah, obviously a big red flag if they say, oh, we don't have it. Actually, that could be genuine sometimes, can't it? That they just might not have it.
I'd be surprised if a service is emailed, and if you didn't have a physical copy, you should have a hard copy.
Okay.
There should be an email somewhere with the report on it. It'd be quite easy to get. If a service didn't have it, they should be able to get it for you quite easily.
Okay, and what about a TUSA registration report cert? Should that be available in the centres as well?
Yes, you actually have to have your TUSA registration cert displayed in your service. So you'll usually find it in the front area somewhere that it's displayed for everyone. That's something that the inspectors check when they arrive.
And is there any other kind of, I suppose, not facilities, but other kind of bodies that you should register with, even if it's not necessary, but just something that's like a really nice to have? Do you know what I mean?
Of course, TUSA is the main one.
Yes, of course.
A lot of people will be registered with Early Childhood Ireland, which is a great resource for services. Yep. Then you see different things. Any service that has a lot of connections will have them displayed. So if they've taken part in, say, any of the Shields training, they'll have signs up about that. If they've taken part in the Healthy Ireland Smart Star programme, which is a great programme, you get a big disc to display in your service. So it is important to look at the walls and see what's on display. So you can ask these questions. as well, what kind of rewards the service has, or
Yeah. So obviously the more things like that you see around the place, the better, like the better the service is, obviously, at trying to ensure quality in their centres.
Exactly.
When it comes to staff, because you just kind of mentioned it briefly there earlier, I think, what kind of things can parents ask to know about the staff?
I would definitely ask about qualifications to start with. You have a minimum, everyone has to have a minimum of a full level 5 to work in childcare in the first place, and ideally higher. I would like to see some staff with higher qualifications within a service. You can ask about the staff turnover. While it is quite high in the sector, you still want to know that there's some longevity within the staff, especially if it's a full day service that's been open quite a while. There should be some long-term staff.
The less time someone is spending in the company, the worse it is on the children with all the turnover.
Exactly. For the children, the continuity is important for them with the staff.
Definitely.
Not have a huge, while like I said, in childcare at the moment there is quite a high turnover, but you shouldn't be seeing different faces every time you come in either.
Yeah, that's true. And I think so. One of the things maybe to note with parents is that even though there is a high turnover, maybe not to get discouraged if the company is expanding, because I know that happens a lot of the time. Childcare, especially chains. I know sometimes chains get a bad name, but they do also expand. So more staff obviously comes in, but that's not something to frown upon, I wouldn't say.
Absolutely. And in the current climate, all services are hiring more to have more staff around.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so you are going to see new faces in all services at the moment. I think once there's a few, or once some of the more senior staff have been there, that's a good sign.
Yeah, puts your minds at ease more. Okay. And then again, with the transparency thing that we spoke there with the staff, when it comes to policies and procedures, should that be readily available to parents as well?
Again, absolutely. Most services will have a parent's handbook with all the policies available to them. And this is something that I would really encourage parents to look at, because with the policies, you want to make sure that the service you choose for your child, that you're on the same level, that you have the same ideas when it comes to things like healthy eating or behaviour management, that you're on the same page as the service and that you're happy to follow their policies.
Yeah, definitely. Or what kind of behaviour management should be expected in a childcare facility?
It should be positive behaviour. Time-out shouldn't be a thing, or any of these naughty steps or anything like that. They shouldn't exist anymore. It should be all very positive. Distraction, talking to children, depending on the age, obviously. Talking to them about what's right and wrong, but you never want to see anyone label a child or label you only label the behaviour. That would be a red flag if I saw a staff telling a child they were bold, say, as opposed to saying that behaviour is not nice.
Yeah, exactly. Because children at that age, they're so little, they don't know. Absolutely. So they could have seen it somewhere thinking that it's okay, but it's not.
Yeah, you want it to be all a positive note. No such things as punishments or anything like that are acceptable anymore.
When it comes to parental expectations, so I suppose there is a wide range of people. People are different. Some parents are going to be very relaxed about their children in childcare. Other parents are going to have quite high expectations. How would you manage that? Because I've noticed before, some parents in general, they just have, and I don't know where it comes from. It probably just comes from when we were kids, that the kind of activities that should be implemented in a childcare setting are all very traditional. So, like the maths and the languages and the reading, and that all these things should be taught kind of early. That's not always the case though with children. So what would you say? How would you say you would manage that if a parent kind of has these expectations, or they think that that's what's going to happen in a childcare setting? What would be kind of, I suppose, maybe the natural run of the day? What kind of activities would be done?
It's vary from creche to creche, and depending on what curriculum people are following. Some people follow Montessori and will follow it quite strictly, and others follow the Steiner approach, or whatever the service in particular has. But the most important thing is play. That's proven, it's researched, that children will learn through play. So what you really want to see is a lot of sensory activity going on, lots of things that they can get their hands into, Play-Doh and sand and water, that type of thing. These all, when they're measuring, and they're playing with the sand and they're playing with jugs, or they're measuring, they're actually developing all the basis for mathematical skills and for their language skills. So they don't actually need to be taught these things until they go to school. It's all about the foundations and the love of learning from a very young age. You want to see lots of art activities and lots of outdoor play.
Yeah, so like they can learn, like you said, learn through play. So they're doing the sand and water play, but they're actually learning volume from it. Or, they're drawing, but they're learning colors, primary, secondary, tertiary colors, and that kind of thing. So it's more, it's not as black and white as I think some people kind of see education for children. It's more,
Yes.
what's the word that you would think?
You don't want to see in preschools, you don't want to see them being taught how to write letters or numbers like that, because it can actually be detrimental to their learning, because when they go to school, they're taught a specific way. And it's
Yes,
very
I was
important that they have the right foundations when they go to school, so that the teacher can work with that blank slate.
Exactly. I was going to say that, because at the end of the day, teachers are trained differently to teach children to do things like that. So if you teach them one way and then they have to relearn, it could be very confusing at that age. Because at the end of the day, they're going into junior infants. They're only, or senior infants, whatever. They're still only little. They're 4, maybe sometimes 5. So
yeah, it's really, the play is by far the most important thing. And they're learning a lot more than, and their social skills, their social and emotional skills are the most important things before they go to school.
Yeah.
They need to be able to, manage their own stuff and eat their own lunch or put on their own coat.
Yeah, so basically,
help with in school.
Exactly. So basically kind of focus on the, I suppose what we call in childcare is like the PILES acronym. So physical, intellectual, yourself, language, emotional, social. That should be kind of what's mostly focused on, rather than actual by the book curriculums. And say there's children that are, say there's 2 kids in the setting and they're siblings. I know some parents sometimes might like their children to kind of, especially if they're spending like a whole day there together, that they want their kids to maybe visit each other sometimes. Is that accepted? Do you allow it?
Yes, we do.
Be encouraged
in our own service, and that's something that is encouraged. And throughout, if you go to any trainings, that would be something that's mentioned quite a bit. Obviously, again, in the current climate with COVID, it may not be possible, so people will have to understand that as well, because of the whole mixing with pods.
Yes, definitely.
Of course, at the moment. But in general, before all of this, we would have let them mix in the garden time or visit each other during the day. It is important for families to be allowed to do that, for the siblings to be allowed to see each other during the day and not be kept separate all day long.
And then sleeping arrangements. That's kind of one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because I know there's, it's quite a big one, I suppose. So how would that be managed for, I suppose, babies up until?
Yeah, so you absolutely,
all the way up, actually.
When you're viewing a nursery, you want to be shown the sleeping areas. They really need to, there's a few things to observe, maybe things that you might not ask in a service, but you can certainly observe them when you're going in. The sleep rooms, they should be well ventilated. Things like watching out for the heating, the space between the beds. Children under 2 ideally are supposed to be in cots, but of course you can have children that are closer to the 2 and like to climb out of the cots, but generally this will be risk assessed if they're going to go into a bed. You want to know that how often they're checked, and this should all be documented.
Yeah. And is there any policies around?
Every service should have a safe sleep policy.
So then when a parent is doing their inspections, so we kind of talked about, expectations and that kind of thing, but let's start from the start, I suppose. So they walk into the setting. Let's do this as a mini TUSLA inspection, actually, right? So they come in, they knock on the door. What should happen from then on?
Okay, so you obviously expect to be greeted professionally and friendly. Yes. You can get a vibe get a feeling for the atmosphere in the nursery straight away, and this is something to keep an eye on as you're going through. You want to be watching the interactions, not only between the staff and the children, but also between the staff and the other staff members. If there's any kind of tension or anything, you will feel it. So be aware of that going in, that you want to observe certain things. There are different things that you can ask about, and then things that you just want to observe. We have an open door policy where the parents have the code to the front door and they can walk in, so they, it kind of shows that you've nothing to hide.
Exactly, yeah. Back to the transparency bit.
Into their child's room, they can get up. They can't at the moment, but usually they can get as far as their child's room without someone having to let them in, or without having a child brought out. I'm not a fan of the children being brought out to the parents. Obviously, COVID is different during COVID, but in normal times, I wouldn't be a fan of that, because I feel like it's, you're almost looking like you have something to hide, even though you probably don't. But I think the open door policy is very important.
Exactly. I have before who viewing for their child, it looked very staged, because obviously, the parent rings, they set up a time that they're going to come do the viewing, and it's like they're just putting on a show to make it look like that's how she said she felt, that it was just
and I think
too arranged or something.
I think if it's not natural, you'll feel it.
You should, like, I think specifically maybe look out for if all the children are like sitting around the table doing convenient activities. There should be like maybe a few different things that are kind of going on in the room.
Yeah, there should be choice. The children should always have choice. They should never be forced into doing any particular activity.
And what are the kind of I suppose when they're walking into a room, because obviously you're going to bring the parents into the room, what kind of things do you expect to see when you walk in? Just kind of basics, I suppose. Should there be kind of interaction with the staff member and the parent there? I
Yeah,
don't
so
know.
generally
General.
whoever is, usually probably a manager will facilitate the viewing, but
Yes.
when the parent comes into the room, the staff generally would greet the parent as well and acknowledge them and talk to them. You want to be watching where the staff are as well. They should be at a child's level if they're down. You don't want constantly to see staff standing over, particularly the younger children. It's very important to see that they work at the children's level, or if they're speaking to them, that they're getting down to the child's level. It's important to see that the equipment in the room is readily available to the children, and again, that it's at the child's level. You really need to consider how things look from the child's perspective. So, they're a lot smaller. Are things at their level? Did the staff get down to their level when interacting with them? Watch their interactions, or that it's very important to note that kind of thing, that you have to remember that you're an adult, but your child is quite small.
Well, that's it, because you kind of forget yourself, don't you?
Absolutely.
And then
how it appears to them.
yeah, definitely. And then the other thing, I suppose, there should be information for parents themselves in the rooms of the setting. So what kind of information should they see weekly or even daily, I suppose? So it should be like meal plans, I suppose, or
Again,
curriculum.
it would depend on the nursery. So services provide, others don't. If they provide meals, that you would usually see your menus in advance. And in a lot of services, the parents provide the meals. Like in our own service, the parents provide the meals, which they're quite happy to do, because some parents prefer to decide themselves what the children eat. So there's different options there as well, and it's something as well that if you're, when you're looking into a service, to look into. But another thing about meal times is you want to know that the children are getting enough time to eat, that they're not being rushed. It's no harm to do a second inspection and try and have it at a different, if you're viewing a service, if you're having a second viewing, to have it at a different time of the day.
I noticed before, because I used to manage a creche a long time ago at this stage, but I noticed before that when parents came in to do viewings with me, they weren't all they never really did. It was very rare that parents would do a second viewing. It's like they didn't know that they could do that.
You can view as many times as you as many times. I can't really see why a service wouldn't allow viewings before it's a big decision to make.
That's it. That's what I was thinking too, because that's what I'm saying. They used to call and they'd ask lots of questions, but it's like they never said, "Oh, can I come again?" It was obviously readily available. Come in and have a look again. But
if they need childcare fast, you have to get people that they've had, that whatever childcare service they've been using, or if they're using childmind, that it's fallen through and they're looking for a space quickly. But I suppose they do need to remember that it's still important to choose the right place and not to rush into it.
Yeah, so definitely do the second viewing if you really have to. Maybe at a different time of the day could also be a good idea.
Yeah, I think a different time of the day is a good idea, to just view, just to see a different time of the service. Like I said, if you happen to view at a meal time, it's always good to see how that goes, because again, the staff should be down at the children's levels, interacting with them when they're eating and not rushing them, I think is really important.
After all that, I suppose there's also things that parents should kind of keep in mind when it comes to Asher and Shielta. They're a very important piece of legislation that are considered daily in a childcare setting. So is there information that should be available for parents to see on that in the rooms?
Yeah, so there should be evidence of activities. Depends on what type of way the service approaches it. I know some services use tablets and they might be sending pictures of activities home or details of activities home on a daily basis through that. Or a lot of places will have a journal in the room that has all that information available. Everything should be available to the parents if they want to see it. There shouldn't be anything to hide in that. Most services will take lots of photos. I know for us, we have journals in the room with photos of all the types of activities that are done. There's signs about Astra everywhere. Astra is obviously very important. It's the curriculum framework and it's flowing through everything, and it's all about play, about learning through play. So that, usually places would have posters on the walls, plenty of things. You want to see lots of art on the walls, and that it's being done. The place should be bright and inviting.
Yeah, it should just be a nice welcoming kind of place so you feel comfortable.
It should be evidence of the child's work around the rooms.
The other thing I actually wanted to bring up with you and ask is what's the kind of general consensus in the industry about cameras in the rooms? I know many, many years ago, I don't know if you remember it, but the primetime expose that happened. And then after that, lots of childcare settings started putting up cameras into their rooms. I suppose maybe as a precaution or something. What's the kind of general consensus of that now? Because
then I think that's very 50-50. I can see pluses to having cameras in, and I can also see, some services, that it's a trust thing. They trust their staff and they don't have cameras. Cameras can also protect both staff and children in many circumstances. I don't really see a huge negative to them, as long as they're handled properly and that everything's done confidentially. That's extremely important, that, who has access to this material.
GDPR thing, I think, because I
Absolutely.
know some places allow you to log in through an app and others have it there just in case maybe an accident happens. So
Yeah,
just to kind of
and
see how
I'm not sure how I feel about everybody being able to log in and see, because
exactly.
I mean, I'm sure you know yourself when you're in a setting, children can, lots of things can happen during the day. They could have an accident in the room.
Yeah. Oh, it's a big GDPR
They
thing.
can, yeah, exactly. And you just, for the children's confidentiality, I'm not sure if having everybody being able to watch them all day long is fair.
That's
But
it.
again, the cameras, for certain situations, they can be,
Exactly.
they
Like
can
like
be
the accidents or something like that. But in
yeah,
general,
absolutely,
I
yeah.
think there should be some kind of privacy because I don't know, if I had a child in a creche and there was access through an app, I wouldn't want everybody looking at my kid. So
Exactly. It's, there is, and the children don't have, they haven't agreed with everybody watching them. I think
exactly.
people forget that children have a voice too.
That's it.
They should be included in decisions.
Definitely. Yep, I would really agree with that. Um, okay, so that's kind of, I suppose, the things that you should look out for. Is there any kind of specific questions or anything else that maybe we haven't covered that a parent ask or should know?
It's probably I would ask about professional development for
Yeah.
staff.
Okay.
You want to see that this is something that's encouraged and supported.
Hmm.
Things are changing and moving all the time, and if you want the quality to be upheld, the staff need to be doing regular training. Like it's same in most sectors, professional development is extremely important. There should be plenty of certs available for all members of staff. There should be absolutely someone on the premises that has first aid response trained all the time. You probably want to see things like you want to see everyone trained in child protection.
Fire
Um,
safety.
yeah, fire safety, manual handling, they're all important. If you're using kitchens, food hygiene, important. And then other things like diversity and inclusion, or a lot of services will have completed the link program and have a link coordinator at the moment for inclusion and things
Yeah.
like that. So these are all programs that are available, and you want to see that services are partaking in them.
Yeah, definitely, because the more training, obviously, the better quality of care that the child is going to get, and they're not going to be. It's it's always like childcare always changes. There's lots of things that are always introduced into it, so you want to see that the service is moving with the times rather than just kind of staying stationary to
Yes,
whenever they
exactly. If
opened.
you want to keep up with best practice, then professional
Exactly,
development is the way to go. Engaging with these courses is important.
definitely. And then I suppose one of the topics that is well, it is important, I suppose, and a lot of parents kind of struggle with it. I find sometimes is the financial side of childcare. So obviously fees are quite high. Childcare is a um, very expensive expense that parents have monthly. So what kind of help is out there? Is there some kind of subsidies that parents could get
Yeah,
towards
so
childcare?
this has changed again in the last year or so. So now there's the National Childcare Scheme. So every parent can apply for that. You can do it online. It's at ncs.gov.ie.
Mhm.
So there's a calculator on this. There's a universal subsidy, and then there's a means tested subsidy. So you can use the calculator to work out if it's worth applying for the means tested one. It is a lot better than it used to be. The supports are quite higher, and a lot more parents are definitely benefiting from the scheme. It has its flaws. It is leaving out some areas. I know a lot of school age services are having trouble with theirs. There is areas that need to be addressed on it. But for preschool children, there are some good subsidies available through that, especially
And
for anyone on lower incomes than that. The supports are good.
definitely. So just a little bit of research and kind of
Yeah,
it's
so that's
there.
all
It's
on that
there.
website. You want to have a look at that website. And like I
Yeah.
said, there's a calculator so you can put in all your details and you can work out exactly what you're entitled to.
Definitely. And if parents are struggling with it, I suppose they can always just turn to the childcare facility and the help is there from,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
professionals
Anyone
there.
who's managing a service will be able to give you all the information that you need on this.
Okay, grand. And is there generally, I don't know if this is the case or not, but have you found generally that with all these that get introduced annually or whenever they get introduced, that childcare places tend to up their fees to suit the subsidies, I suppose, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, again, I think it depends. A lot of services are increasing their fees year on year,
Hmm.
but it's also overheads have become more expensive year on year, so it's difficult to judge that. There is some of the subsidies are quite high and may actually exceed the price of the week in some places. But again, it depends on where you live. If you actually look online at records, there's certain areas of the country that are more expensive for childcare anyway than are where I am. It's a little bit on the lower side for the country.
Oh, definitely. Like, I mean, if you compare Dundrum to Leitrim, it's going to be
Yeah,
completely
exactly.
different.
Yeah, and we're the same. In Tipperary, it's not. We wouldn't compare to Dublin prices,
That's
but
true.
you can understand why a Dublin service would have to charge more.
Oh yeah, definitely, 100%. So from just discussion, we've had some parents that were in touch that wanted to kind of get an opinion on certain situations and how you could deal with them. So one of the questions was, how would a parent know, or how would you yourself know if you had a child, how would you know if your child is ready for school?
So ready for school, again, as I was saying earlier, it's not about what they know as far as reading or writing or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's really about their social and emotional skills. So you want them to be comfortable with other children, adults, able to interact, know how to share, how to manage their emotions is really important. And you will see, and again, a good quality service will do a lot of work around emotional development in the last year, particularly at the program I was talking about earlier, the Healthy Ireland Smart Start program. They have a whole area around emotional development that's, books and things to go with it. And it's really good for preschool children, and it kind of teaches them how to identify their emotions and, how to understand how they're feeling. And it's important for them to understand that it's okay to be happy, but it's also okay to be sad.
Definitely. So
they can feel negative emotions, and that is fine. And I think the emotional development is really important because they need to be able to regulate when they go to school. And then you have obviously things like being able to use the bathroom, that kind of independence, being able to manage their own lunch, tidy up their things, not lose their own things, look after their own stuff, maybe be able to put on their coat. Those are the type of things that are the most important before they go to school. Obviously then their physical development as well.
So level of
balance and their running and that type of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Again, this is all a good quality creche will focus on all of this before they go to school.
Yeah, so parents shouldn't focus on the 2+2 and that Billy can write their name. It's more on the more important things for a child, like the social and the emotional, like you said.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the social and emotional are the most important.
Yeah, definitely. The other question we had was, a certain parent got in touch to say that their child is picking up bad habits from another child that's in the room, and they don't know how to really approach or deal with this. They know that that particular child has had issues before, and she just wants to know, how could the creche help intervene in this or help in this kind of situation?
Okay, so this depends on the behaviours, and also this is why it's so important to know what your service's behaviour management policy is. Because if there's certain behaviours that should be specifically addressed within the behaviour management policy, such as biting or anything like that, it's very important to know what their policy is in it, and that you can ask, are they following their policies on it? If they're using positive behaviour management, there shouldn't be too many issues with behaviour.
You know yourself, if you have like a really particularly difficult kid and you approach the parents, but sure, nothing changes.
Yeah, exactly. So, this is why it's important to follow your behaviour management policy. They're there for a reason, and all the parents do need to work with you on it. And the behaviour management policies need to be really clear, even if they do go as far as suspension or whatever it may be. That sounds strict. There does need to be
because at the end of the day, you kind of have to look out for the welfare of them all.
It has to be for everyone. Every child has to be safe and secure in the service. The most reasonable expectations for a parent in a creche is that your child is safe, that they're well cared for, and they're happy.
That's it. Yeah. A lot of the times parents kind of have warped expectations from a childcare centre. They just want loads of activities done and a really detailed report back. But sometimes it's just enough to have maybe 3 things that a child has done during the day, but they did them really well and they were really engrossed in it and they took away a lot from it, rather than lots of things that were done quickly and then it was just kind of pointless at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think parents need to remember that the ratios in Ireland are not that low. So if you're in a preschool room, each staff member is responsible for 11 children.
Yeah.
The amount of time they have to write up on each child each day is limited.
So that brings up another good point, that like, even though the reports and all the writing that they can do during the day is limited, there's so much paperwork that has to be done in a childcare setting. Parents don't kind of really know about that a really good thing to actually have is like a good relationship built up with the person that's looking after your children, and have like the bit of, have a chat with them in the morning, have a chat in the afternoon when they're getting collected or whatever it may be, and build up a relationship that way, because you're going to find out more from just having a quick chat than what you're going to get from a piece of paper. Even if it is a detailed piece of paper, you'll pick up on the
important between the staff and the parents. And again, a good quality creche will have very open communication, and they will if you're concerned about something, they'll put time aside to talk to you, whether it be a phone call or a meeting. If you have concerns, ask about them, and they need to be addressed. A service will accommodate those types of meetings, and try and put your mind at ease. It's very important to have a good relationship with the staff that are looking after your children.
What's the day-to-day to look like throughout? I suppose it's different for each age group, but let's just go kind of, I suppose, from the babies to maybe the toddlers and then to the preschool, because that kind of leaves some gaps in the middle as well. But
so again, it'll depend on the service and on the routine. A daily routine is usually available to parents, kind of a general routine, and you want to know that there's flexibility in the routines as well.
Yes.
What I would like to see in a routine, you want to see regular meals, regular snacks as well. So whatever their main meal times are, that there are snacks in between. or that the children, there's snacks available to the children if they get hungry.
Yeah, for babies that would be different though, wouldn't it? If they have, because babies would tend to be on different routines, wouldn't they?
Exactly, and that's another thing you want to, especially if you have a child in a nursery and they're under 1.
Yeah,
I think you want to know that the service is working around your child's routine as opposed to the other way around. Yes. Fair enough, when they get to bigger rooms and they're in bigger ratios, I know, there is set routines in those rooms, but for very young children, it's very important that the child's own routine can be followed. And this is why a settling in period is so important as well. And yes. Settling in policy. So most services, again, will have that. For example, for us, we would do a week of settling in where, on for Monday, say the parent just comes into you for a week or for an hour, on the first day, and just has a chat and starts to get to know the staff, and they start to get to know your child. And then they kind of go through what happens in the week, and you tell them all about your child as the week goes on, and all their likes and their dislikes. And, it gives you a chance to develop a relationship with the staff and to start to trust them before your child is in with them every day.
I know some parents might find it very difficult to leave their child during a settling in period. So I know a couple of days in, you could be leaving your child in for maybe 2-3 hours or whatever it is, and you go off and you have your cup of coffee. I know that could be very difficult for parents, but what would be the message that you give to parents there in that kind of case?
It's often more difficult for the parent than it is for the child. Children are, they're very adaptable, and for them it's a new and exciting environment and things they haven't seen before and new toys to play with. And I often find that it's more difficult for the parent. But again, like I said, it's really important that your nursery has good communication and that they have it that, if you want to ring in at any time of the day to check on your child, that should be absolutely fine. Especially when you're a new parent to the service and you're just settling in your child. There should be lots of communication.
Exactly, because communication equals trust, and then eventually you're just going to drop your kid in and leg it straight away, and you'll have no worries in the world. You'll just know that they're in good hands.
Exactly, and that's why that settling in period is so important.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, just I suppose before we finish off, because that's kind of all the questions that we had from everybody, I'd like to think that we covered a lot on what for parents to look for, what to ask for, what to expect. Online, I suppose you could find a whole host of questions that you can ask, ranging from absolutely everything. But as you said yourself, main thing to focus on is the atmosphere in the place. That's the most important kind of thing to look out for the interactions between the childcare workers and the children. I want to say everything else is secondary to that, but it's not really. I suppose just the most important thing to focus on is the atmosphere and the relationships.
Very important, and I think that's something that you'd pick up quite easily in a service, especially if you view a few different places. You'll get a feel for, and different services are right for different parents.
That's it. Just
looking at 2 services, and they could each fall in love with the 2 separate services. It depends on what you're looking for yourself and what type of service that you're looking for. If it's got a very homely vibe or if it's a very modern vibe, it really depends. You need to know what you're looking for yourself.
I think it's like one of those things. Once you're in there, you'll just know.
Exactly.
All right, that's perfect. We're going to finish it here. And if you have any, I suppose, childcare related questions, a good source of information would obviously be the TUSLA website, the Early Childhood Care and Education website. Early Childhood Ireland website would be a good one to look at. Canavan and Byrne, that's another good one. A whole host of information. So it's all easily accessible. So Siobhan, thanks for joining us for the podcast. It was a pleasure talking to you because you're around all the time, but I actually never had a chance to talk to you properly. So it was really nice to have you here and answer all the questions that we have had.
No problem at all. Thanks very much.
No worries. Thanks, Siobhan.
And that was Siobhan Browne, our early years specialist, and a huge thank you again to her for coming onto this episode and talking about the importance of good quality childcare. So there you have it, guys. Every day's a school day. I hope that was as interesting and informative to you as it was to me. I hope that you took something away from it at least. So I'm going to leave it there. You can find us on all the usual podcast platforms. So just search for the Open College podcast series and we'll be there for you. Or you can just go to theopencollege.com/podcast series for all the information there, and all the links will be there as well. So thanks again for listening. Goodbye for now.